If you are getting ready to drop 50 grand on a 4x4 adventure vehicle, you are likely staring down two specific options, the Jeep Wrangler and the Ford Bronco. Take a look at this red Bronco. To the untrained eye, these two SUVs share the exact same purpose. They are boxy, they sit high on massive tires, and you can take the doors and roof off for a weekend in the dirt. But beneath the paint, these two vehicles rely on completely opposite engineering philosophies. When a front tire strikes a jagged rock on an extreme trail, one of these vehicles will glide seamlessly over the obstacle. The other is highly likely to lose traction or snap a vital steering component. Surviving that kind of terrain has very little to do with engine horsepower. It comes down to why a century-old skeletal layout easily outperforms modern automotive engineering the second the pavement ends. To understand the difference, we have to look at the Ford Bronco's natural habitat, high-speed paved interstates, and washboard dirt roads. In this animated diagram, you can see the Bronco's independent front suspension, or IFS. As the name implies, each wheel moves up and down on its own. This allows the suspension to absorb highway potholes rapidly without disturbing the main cabin. But watch what happens when we place that same independent system on a massive trail obstacle. As one tire climbs a boulder, the chassis tilts severely. Because the wheels are not structurally linked, the opposite tire simply lifts into the air. You immediately lose contact with the ground. When that tire hangs over a gap, the vehicle's weight places immense leverage on the long steering tie rods. Push a lifted vehicle too hard in this exact scenario, and those rods will bend or snap completely. Modern independent suspension isolates you from the road to provide daily comfort. But on a jagged trail, that exact isolation breaks your traction. Now look at the Jeep Wrangler. Its core architecture is a solid front axle, a proven military-grade layout that dates back to World War II. Looking at this geometric wireframe, the structure is incredibly simple. A thick, rigid steel beam permanently connects the left and right wheel hubs. When the left tire climbs a massive boulder, it pushes that side of the axle upward. Because it acts like a seesaw, this motion mechanically forces the right side down into the dirt. Looking at the pressure heat maps in this diagram, you can see the result. Both tires glow brightly, maintaining maximum ground pressure no matter how severely the vehicle tilts. The rubber stays planted. Jeep amplifies this geometry with an electronic sway bar disconnect. With the push of a button, the suspension uncouples, freeing that solid axle to flex and drop even deeper into trail ruts. They pair that flexibility with an approach angle of 47.4 degrees to clear steep rock faces without scraping the bumper. Then the transmission utilizes a 100-to-1 crawl ratio, allowing the engine to apply incredibly precise, slow-motion torque without the driver ever having to touch the gas pedal. A solid axle operates as a mechanical force multiplier. It leverages the Earth's extreme unevenness against itself, guaranteeing you maintain forward momentum. But eventually, you have to drive home on a paved interstate, and this is where the daily reality sets in. The exact rigid geometry that dominates rocks makes the solid axle miserable on smooth pavement. Every pothole on the right side transfers a jolt to the left. The steering feels loose, the vehicle wanders across the lane, and you have to constantly make micro-adjustments just to drive straight. Over time, the wear and tear from that design can trigger a self-sustaining mechanical vibration known to off-roaders as death wobble. This violent shaking is the direct result of localized mechanical play. When the bushings and the track bar wear down, the heavy, solid axle is allowed to oscillate left and right at highway speeds. Which brings us right back to the dealership lot and the unavoidable laws of physics. Ford built the Bronco as a compromise. It uses modern engineering to give you a vehicle that drives comfortably to work every day, while still being able to tackle a moderate dirt trail on the weekend. There is no magic machine that defies physics. The Bronco is an excellent street vehicle that happens to be highly capable off-road. The Wrangler is a purpose-built tractor that intentionally sacrifices your highway comfort to guarantee total dominance on the rocks. You drop 50 grand on a hardcore 4x4 because you want to take the roof off, remove the doors, and conquer the wilderness. But the reality is, you will spend most of your time grinding through suburban gridlock. For decades, the Jeep Wrangler has been the undisputed king of the trail. It dominates the dirt, but on the pavement, it punishes drivers with a noisy, cramped, and physically exhausting highway commute. Seeing an opportunity, Ford reintroduced the Bronco to capture that massive consumer nostalgia. They promise to blend this classic utilitarian aesthetic with modern daily comfort. But automotive engineering is a strict zero-sum game. You cannot simply inject refined highway comfort into a purpose-built rock crawler without physically taking something else away. The modern Bronco successfully cures the physical pain of the daily commute, but achieving that smooth ride introduces two massive, unavoidable costs to the buyer. True automotive comfort is never free. It's paid in rigid mechanical limitations and severe financial equity losses. To understand why the Wrangler is so punishing on the highway, we have to look underneath it. The vehicle's identity is entirely defined by its underlying skeleton. Jeep uses a solid front axle. This is a heavy-duty, rigid steel beam that physically links the left front wheel directly to the right front wheel. When you are navigating massive boulders, this design acts like a seesaw. If a rock shoves the left tire up, the rigid axle forces the right tire down into the dirt, guaranteeing traction when you need it most. But on the highway, that rigid connection transfers every single impact. Hit a pothole on the left, and the shockwave violently shoves the right side of the vehicle. The truck wanders across the lane, forcing you to make constant, exhausting steering corrections just to drive straight at 70 miles per hour. The Wrangler's uncompromising, bare-bones design carries a secondary physical cost.
Because it is engineered to strip away its roof and doors, it lacks a traditional enclosed safety cage, leading to significant struggles in modern offset crash tests. The Jeep Wrangler forces you to endure a harsh daily commute and constant physical steering effort to maintain its status as an unbreakable trail tractor. Ford chose a completely different mechanical path. The Bronco uses independent front suspension, or IFS. With IFS, the left and right wheels are separated. If the left tire drops into a deep washboard rut, the suspension absorbs it locally. The impact never reaches the opposite wheel, and the passenger cabin remains perfectly level. This independent architecture completely eliminates the dreaded steering wander. You can cruise down the interstate effortlessly, tracking perfectly straight. Ditching the solid axle also frees up physical width underneath the chassis. This gives the Bronco significantly more passenger shoulder room and opens up the back for a massive 83 cubic feet of cargo space. But physics demands a trade. Independent suspension physically cannot flex and stretch as deeply as a solid axle. In extreme low-speed rock crawling scenarios, the Bronco will lift tires into the air, where the Jeep would remain firmly planted. Ford successfully manufactured a comfortable, spacious daily driver, but only by artificially capping its own extreme off-road articulation limits. In reality, 90% of buyers will gladly trade an inch of rock crawling articulation for a quiet, spacious commute. But choosing the modernized SUV triggers a final, inescapable penalty that hits you long after you leave the dealership: rapid depreciation. This chart plots depreciation data from IC cars. Over a 5-year cycle, the Jeep Wrangler loses just 35.6% of its retail value. Map the Ford Bronco onto that same timeline, and its value plummets, shedding 54.2% over 5 years. That 18.6 percentage point discrepancy translates directly into thousands of dollars in lost equity for the Bronco owner. The market economics drive this gap. The Jeep's mechanical purity, old-school solid axles, and massive aftermarket ecosystem make it a highly stable financial asset. The Bronco, despite its strong initial demand, suffers the steep depreciation of a typical tech-heavy SUV. The true cost of comfort is an unavoidable choice. You either pay with daily physical exhaustion on the highway, or you bleed thousands of dollars in lost equity at the dealership.